What does it take to put on a show?
You know, I think that from the very beginning, I was like the fullback that saw the hole in the line. You know, rock and roll was full of rock heroes. The Beatles, the Stones. There were so many great rock, Elvis. There were no rock villains. There was no Captain Hook for all of these Peter Pans. And I saw that and I went, I would love to play the villain. I would love to be the Captain Hook of rock and roll. And be a humorous, really kind of let them worry about if this guy is for real or not, this Alice Cooper character, you know. And it was a character. It was something I had to invent. I saw, people say, where did you get the look? And I went, okay. I first saw Barbarella, and I saw the Black Queen, who had switchblades coming out of her leather coat thing. And I went, oh, that's good. Make a note of that. And then whatever happened to Baby Jane? The scariest thing about that movie was Bette Davis's makeup. She had this white caked makeup on that was cracking, and the eye makeup was off, and the lips were all off. And I went, oh yeah, you add that to that, and you've got a pretty devastating looking villain.
And the name, Alice Cooper.
People want to think that it came from the Ouija board, that it was a 13th century witch and all this stuff, but it was us sitting there going, what would be the name of the sweetest old lady on the block that makes cookies for the kids? I was trying to think of Betty Crocker, but it came up Alice Cooper. I said, that's the most American grandma name I can think of. Well, they get that name, and then they get us.
I want to ask you, you grew up the son of a preacher, of a pastor. You had a pretty typical, very good childhood.
Yeah.
But the question is, where does this Mr. Hyde personality come from? Do you think it's somewhat a revolt against your father and the strict religious doctrine?
My dad wasn't strict. My mom wasn't strict. That was the thing. I think I saw as an artist that rock and roll, horror, and comedy were all in bed together. I mean, horror and comedy, to me, the scarier the movie was, the more I was laughing. You know, I was going, this is so over the top, it's hysterical, you know. Add rock to that, and let's see what happens. And to me, it was a natural thing. It just was so natural for us. The very first show, the earwigs, in high school, we were the earwigs. We put on Beatle wigs. We had our track uniforms on, and we did parodies of Beatles songs. That very first show, there was a coffin on stage with a guy coming out, and there was a guillotine. And that somehow followed us. It just was always there. Because I think that we understood that every bit of this horror that you saw had a punchline to it. It had a comic relief to it. And you couldn't be a villain without getting it in the end. The bad guy's got to get it. And there's a relief to that to the audience. But at the same time, the audience was laughing too. They got the joke. There was always a good punchline somewhere in there, where tongue-in-cheek, where you could look at the audience and they would go, I got it, I get it.
You once said, or at least recorded as saying, that you and what you brought to rock and roll drove a stake through the heart of the love generation.
That's pretty much it. Because everything was peace and love and wonderful, and all of a sudden here came rock and roll Dracula, you know, and upset everything. For a good reason, but it was for a good reason. You know, it needed to be upset. Right now it needs to be upset. Rock and roll is in a good place right now, and people say, how can you say that? It's almost dead. I go, no, rock and roll is now on the outside looking in the window. I said, rock and roll needs to be outlaw. We were too much the apex for a long time. Now it's better for the young bands to be looking in the window going, we're the outlaws.
Which is the way rock and roll started.
That's what it should be.
Well, you faced a big backlash from religious people,
Yeah.
big backlash from parents. This has in many ways been the making of you and Alice Cooper, the backlash.
That's pretty much was their springboard, was the backlash. And as long as you kept putting out great records and hit records and doing great shows where the audience walked away going, that was the best show I've seen. All of that was just, all it did was just kind of pushed it forward, pushed it forward. Now there is no shock rock. When Alice Cooper or Rob Zombie or Marilyn Manson can't be more shocking than CNN. Because now, back then they cut my head off and it would lop off, you know, and it looked great, and blood all over the place, and oh, this is the worst thing, our kids can't go see this. Now you turn on TV and they're really doing that. They knew it was a trick. Of course they knew it was a trick. Now I watch CNN and I got to turn my head away because some guy's going to cut a guy's head off in the Mideast. That's shock rock. I mean, that's real. And all of us realize that. We use shock as a device in the show now, but we certainly don't think it's the motor running the thing. The motor is still the music, you know.
The motor is still the music. Like that phrase.
Yeah.
Sitting here talking to you, you and I have not met before.
No.
I'm struck by how normal you are. Don't take offense at that.
Oh, no, no, no.
Because there are any number of people who have a picture of Alice Cooper on the stage in a knife fight or throwing a chicken in a crowd or something. What's the difference between the public perception of you and who you are as a person?
There was a gray area there for a long time when I was drinking and taking drugs. I got to a point where I didn't really know where Alice began, and if I went out to a bar that night, well, do I take the snake? Do I put the makeup on? I don't want to disappoint anybody. And it got to a point that when I got sober, I realized that I had to separate the two. That Alice is a character that I get to play on stage. I get to be him, like tonight on this, I get to be Alice. But I'm nothing like Alice. He's a character I play. As soon as I put on the makeup and everything, he's a very arrogant villain. You know, he's very condescending, Ellen Rickman type of, you know, and the audience loves that. They love the fact that Alice is that. And I'll play that to the hilt tonight. But as soon as the curtain comes down, the Tigers win today? I don't know, you know, I'm as normal. I have 3 grandsons. My wife and I, we go to church on Sunday. I was on the PTA. I coached Little League, you know. The kids had no idea I was Alice Cooper. I was Coach Cooper, you know. But that made the Alice character even better, more intense, because I got to play him. I didn't have to be him all the time. In order to be him all the time, I had to fuel it with alcohol and drugs. As soon as I got rid of that, I realized that there was a great separation between the two characters.